And I think we're good to go.
Ready. Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we're going to call this meeting to order. I guess we need to do a roll call of all the planning commissioners. I would be Laura Sandholm. Peter?
Peter Vickery, I'm here. And this is sparkling water.
Gary Pettis.
Oh, whoa. Stop. Laura, can you call
Yes.
their name up and all they do is say here or present?
Okay.
And if you are not speaking, please put your phone on mute. Thank you.
Okay, so first we had Peter, now we have Mike Kirkwood.
Here.
Damian Young.
Here.
Steve Livermore.
Here.
Gary Vars.
I'm here.
And Gary Pettis.
Here.
Did I miss anybody? That then is our roll call. So the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Is there any comments, things that anybody wants to change? If not, do I have a motion?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second, Gary Pettis.
Who so moved?
I did. Gary Vars. Sorry.
And you got Gary was the second.
Yes.
And now I
Gary
have to go
Pettis was
through-
the second?
Yes.
Yes.
So roll call, Laura says aye. Peter?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye. Aye.
Damian?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
And what is that, 7 ayes? So the agenda is approved as written. Next is the approval of the minutes from July 27th. Did anybody have any changes, comments to what they read? If there are no changes or comments, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from July 27th.
I second.
And that was Damian, right? And then the second was who?
Steve.
Steve, okay.
Steve?
Okay, go.
Okay.
Yes, it was Steve was the second.
Okay. Thank you.
So Laura says aye. Then we have Peter,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Damian,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Gary, well, Vars,
Aye.
and then Gary Pettis.
Abstain.
Okay. So we have 6 approvals for the approval of the minutes. So tonight we have 2 public hearings. The first one is a comprehensive plan amendment and rezone. Do you want to tell us about this, Nick?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The first item on your agenda is a comprehensive plan amendment and then also a rezone request at 780 North Branch Road. The property is currently guided and zoned for the density of 1 unit per 10 acres. And the applicants this evening have requested that that be changed to the density of 1 unit per 40 acres, which would mean a guiding land use of permanent agriculture and then a rezone to the agricultural preservation. Does look like we have our applicant here this evening, so I won't go too in depth on the background. I'll let them speak to kind of their plan and their hopes for the project or the property going forward. But I guess I'll give a little bit of a feedback. You know, this topic came up during the comprehensive plan for 2040. there were a few properties that were 40 acres in size, but weren't guided for long-term agricultural use, permanent agriculture. And the council ultimately elected to rezone and re-guide those so they could be enrolled in the agricultural preserves program. And the applicants have expressed interest in that, and that's, I think, in part what is driving the request here. But kind of looking at the basics of it, the property is of sufficient size. It's over 40 acres, has enough frontage on an improved public street. So therefore, there's no issue with the request of the applicants. So we did send out our notice for this public hearing. I, as staff, spoke with a couple of neighboring property owners, was able to explain the process and how it would play out. And there was no formal written comment from either of those neighbors. They seem to be understanding of the goals and objectives that have at least been portrayed to staff for the property. So, like I said, no written comments were submitted. So with that being said, the recommendation would be to recommend that the city council approve the request based on findings in the staff report and subject to those certain conditions. So like I said, our applicant is here if you want to let them go in more detail about kind of their goals and objectives. Otherwise, I am here for staff if there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions before we ask the applicant if they want to add anything?
No.
Okay, well, let's see.
I did have-
Does
I had a
Mr.
question real quick,
Davis? Oh, wait,
Laura.
Steve?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Nick, when you said one resident per 40 acres, I noticed in there, isn't there a request to add a second home, I thought?
I believe they've mentioned the possibility of a guest house, which city ordinance does allow. So another accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
There are restrictions in size and such on that, but they would obviously have the main house, and then they've expressed interest in a accessory dwelling unit, which, like I said, is allowed by ordinance.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was looking for. Thanks, Nick.
Any other points? Mike?
Yes. Yeah, I have a question. Nick, can you give me a thumbnail description of the history here of the 2040 permanent agricultural? I'm trying to read what's behind the screen here. What the history is of this permanent agriculture comprehensive plan, what its intent was, and are there any boundaries that we're supposed to be sensitive to as we look at a decision like this?
So the land use designation of permanent agriculture, that's been in our comprehensive plan. That's just like I said, it's the future land use plan synonymous with the 40 acre minimum. So it's nothing new. The reason it came up during the 2040 comprehensive planning process was there was a few properties that, for whatever reason, probably a comprehensive update in the past or something, they were guided to the 1 unit for 10 acres, where it's a requirement of the Agricultural Preserves Restrictive Covenant that the property be guided for a minimum of 40 acres per lot. So the city had to make a decision whether or not to either pull out those properties or to change the comprehensive plan to guide them for that 40 acre zoning. And that's ultimately what the city elected to do, was to anyone in the program that was, guided to 1 to 10 when they should have been the 1 to 40, was changed to be guided for that less dense, 40 acre minimum zoning. So it's a similar type request here, where we've got a property that's large enough, like I said, over 40 acres in size, that has expressed interest in that program. So it seems fairly consistent with what's been done by the city. So therefore, that's what why the request is being brought forward in part.
So once a property is declared permanent agriculture, then it cannot be used for any other purpose in the future?
I don't think that, I think that's the goal, but I think if you follow the permanent ag permitted uses, they don't necessarily have to be only ag. Most of them are ag or very large lot, single family residence.
It just can't.
Can it be changed in the future?
Absolutely. It would require planning commission and city council approval in the future. but it certainly could.
All right, thank you for the background.
What is the benefit of doing this?
Tax reduction.
Like I said, it is, yeah, the Agricultural Preserves Restrictive Covenant it's a tax program. And the applicants, like I said, have expressed interest in enrolling in that program, but the current zoning and the current density guidelines would not allow for the city to enroll or allow that program or property to be enrolled in the program. So the first step for the property owner is what they're going through now, is to amend the comprehensive plan and then rezone the property to make sure it meets the standards set forth by the statute and the Agricultural Preserves Restrictive Covenant. So if they want to enroll in the program, they have to first do this.
Okay, Gary Vars again. So as I understand what you've said, is that they get a lower taxes by doing this. Is that correct?
Yes, the restrictive covenant and the full benefit could be better explained by the Hennepin County Assessor's Office, but the purpose of it is that it is, 1 to 40 zoning and future land use, but also there is a component that they have to farm the land. It has to be used for agricultural production. So there is that component that has to be complied with, otherwise they don't get the benefit for it.
Is there a percentage of what they have to do of the land?
I don't believe it's quantified, but ultimately the Hennepin County Assessor's Office is the one that monitors the property for that agricultural production. The city more or less acts as a gatekeeper in this situation, making sure that properties that are eligible for this program are enrolling in it. Then
Sure.
The kind of administration of that program is turned over to Hennepin County. So the city no longer plays a role. But also with this program, you are restricted for a minimum of 8 years from any sort of subdivision or development of the property. So that's kind of the trade-off, is that it's essentially locked up for a minimum of 8 years. So there is some give and take with regards to this program.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Yeah. So Nick, this really sounds like it's in line with what we did on the 2040 plan.
That is correct. Yes, it's very similar to what was done, except obviously this case we have someone willingly enrolling themselves in the program after the fact. What happened before was these properties were already enrolled, and however they were changed, to that 1 to 10 density, probably shouldn't have happened, but now we have corrected that and everything is okay.
This is Peter. To amplify on Damien's point, in the 2040 plan that I worked on too, the north part of the city tends to be broken up a little more than those 40-acre parcels, and so that's why that kind of broad area, was in smaller increments, and so there are just a few parcels of that size, and that's why it's easier just to have the plan be uniform, and then there are these exceptions here.
Any other comments? Should we have the applicant speak?
Mm-hmm.
Does the applicant wish to speak? How's that?
Hey, I would love to, and I'll try to be very brief and be additive to the conversation.
Okay. Before you start, you have to say your name and your address.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Shane Davis, 780 North Branch Road, and we're in the process of relocating there, so it's vacant land at this particular moment.
What's your present address?
Present address is 4195 Hillcrest Lane in Wayzata, Minnesota, or Deep Haven. Shows up postally as Wayzata. Deep Haven is the city.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So what I would add to the conversation, and it's implied in our letter that's in your packets, is when we purchased the property, it was being marketed as a development opportunity for potential buyers. It was being marketed as being broken up into 4 different parcels. And so when we bought it, we had the vision of trying to retain the natural beauty of the land. And you'll also see in your packet, there's a pictorial view. And a lot of the property is wetlands, forest, and then open field, which was previously farmed. And so our intention for the property is to make sure that it's not broken into 4 different parcels, that it remains as one parcel for as long as we're living and beyond. We have some plans for the land beyond that to keep it intact. And then additionally, we do plan, and I talked to the assessor about this, we do not have to amend the forest in any way, so we do plan to keep the property as is, keep the forest as is. We don't want to take any forest down, and we will farm just the open land that's already there, that has already been farmed in the past. So you'll see, if you vote to move forward with this, you will see preservation of the land in as much of its natural state as possibly can be. The final thing I would add is we do intend to build what this zoning would allow, which is a small main house, a small accessory house for my disabled son that will be a maximum of 1,000 square feet, or 30% of the the footprint of the main home, and then we would build a barn. So there would be 3 structures, and then everything else would remain as is on the property as you see it. So that's all I've got. If there's any other questions, but hopefully I've been additive, and you see the benefit in us and why we're looking to do this for the community.
Thanks. Any questions for the applicant?
I just got one comment. Thank you for that. It's great to hear your input from it. And honestly, we look forward to having you as a neighbor. So welcome to Minnetrista.
Thank you very much. We're excited.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you for talking to us. And I guess the next thing is we can do a public hearing and see if anybody has any input from the community, right, Chris? So I guess I will open the public hearing.
Yes. Sorry, I couldn't get my phone off of mute.
Okay. So is there anybody here? The public hearing's open. Is there anybody here to speak on this particular item on the agenda, the comprehensive plan amendment and rezone? Okay, I don't hear anybody. If you're on mute, we can't hear you if somebody's trying to say something. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing now. So we've had the public hearing. Any more discussion from the Planning Commission?
Nope.
If there is no more discussion, do I hear a motion?
Gary Vars, I move that we send this request to the City Council for approval.
Any second?
Gary Pettis, I'll second.
Okay, did you get that, Chris?
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we're going to go through the roll call. I'm going to say aye. We have Peter.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Damian.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Gary Vars.
Aye.
And Gary.
Aye.
Okay, that would be 7-0, and that passes. And Nick, do you want to tell him what his next step is?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This item will be forwarded to the City Council at a meeting in their October, either the 5th or the 19th, for final action. And I will keep the applicant posted on the timeline.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're on to the next public hearing.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Mike?
Yes?
Nick or Chris, in my experience on Zoom, there's a toggle key that turns the microphone on and off. Is there a quick toggle key for this GoToMeeting software that you know of?
Do you see your name?
Yes.
Okay, right next to it should show a microphone.
Yes, I understand that. But turning
And
it
that's
on,
how you can toggle. I'm sorry.
Okay, so either way, I have to click somewhere on the screen. There's not a
You have
keyboard. Not a keyboard.
Oh, a keyboard shortcut? Not that I'm aware of. I can
Thank
check with Allie on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next is this application from Jeffrey and Catherine Haley. Nick, you want to give us the background on this to begin with?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The request here is a riparian view shed setback variance at 1340 Morning View Drive. Looks like we have our applicant here and also the contractor they are working with on the project. I'll give a quick background on it. It's a home they are currently working on remodeling. They had submitted for a building permit, which included the addition of a screened porch as well as a pergola and some steps down from an existing deck. Amongst that, there was also some interior remodeling that was proposed. And when the building permit was submitted, it was noted that the screen porch and the deck stairs and the pergola all extend past the riparian view shed setback line. So staff worked with the contractor to allow them to start the interior work, stuff that does not require the variance approval. And then we are here this evening to discuss the screen porch, amongst other things in terms of the riparian view shed setback. And in your packet, staff has outlined the variance review criteria. I won't go too in depth since that was provided in your packet, but as you can see, the request based on the information submitted by the applicants satisfies the criteria and justification for a variance. We also sent notices out to property owners within 500 feet. We did receive one comment in opposition to the request. It was from a resident that was not within the 500 feet, but got the notice through the newspaper as required by the ordinance. So that comment was included in your packet for your review. But with that being said, the recommendation, the conclusion here is that the Planning Commission should recommend to the City Council approval of the variance based on the findings of fact outlined in the staff report and subject to the conditions as outlined. So I am here if there's any questions of the commission. Otherwise, like I said, we do have our property owner and their contractor available for questions as well.
I have one quick question.
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I have one quick question. How far away is the neighbor who opposed the variance? Are they houses, 5 more houses down? I mean, roughly.
They're about 10 houses down.
9 or 10 houses down.
Okay, so there really is no riparian view issue with them at all. It's just something that they decided to comment on.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't appear to directly impact them at this time.
Okay.
So did anybody on either side of this location have any comments? And well, I'll ask the owner maybe to see if he's talked to the people next to him, but you haven't gotten any official ones, right, Nick?
I have not spoken to the neighbors on either side. I did express that to the contractor for the applicant, did express contacting them because they would obviously get a notice as part of the request, and maybe they can speak more to the conversations that were or not had.
Okay, any other questions for Nick?
Madam Chairperson, this is Peter. I do have a question of Nick. What are the two kind of guidelines for that? How far the setback from the lake are, if you could remind me of that.
Are you speaking to basically how the riparian view shed is applied, the two criteria?
Yes, I believe so. Where like you draw a line between the two adjoining properties, I think is one, and then I
correct.
Can't.
Yep. Yes, I can speak to that, Peter. You are correct. One of the provisions is taking a line from the forwardmost protrusion on the home on either side and connecting a straight line, or taking that same closest point and quantifying its setback from the lake and then taking an average of that and applying it to the property in question. In this situation, because of the curvature of the lakeshore and the location of the homes, the most advantageous line is the straight line. However, this proposal exceeds that line and is past it lakeward.
How far?
Basically the width of the porch, I want to say 16 feet.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And how far, and maybe you can't answer this, but how far is the farthest point of the new screen porch from the nearest point of the house? So I can draw a triangle here.
So the proposed porch would be, I believe, 185.2 feet from the lake shore. Like I said, it projects out 16 feet from the existing building face, which this addition was designed specifically to comply with the previous addition, rather, where this porch is coming off of, was specifically designed to be at that setback line. So the porch itself is the full extension beyond the riparian setback line.
Okay, but and maybe you can't answer this, Nick, because you may not have the information. But if I was looking out the nearest window, am I 200 feet from the porch? Am I 100 feet from the farthest point out of the porch, or 20 feet of the porch? I mean, that's going to greatly change the angle of the triangle in my view.
Are you referring to a neighbor's window or a window on this house?
I'm referring to a neighbor's window. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that data was not collected as part of this request and not needed, unfortunately. So I can't answer that one.
And I understand that. I was hopeful, but not expecting.
I got a question for you, Nick, if you got a second.
Yep.
So I know typically when we look at the setbacks, we normally go down the lake and try to get an average of, the setbacks for the other neighbors, because every property is different. Did you do that?
That provision of the ordinance was not researched by the applicant. Like I said, they followed the either or. They chose the straight line. So that's the information that was provided on the survey. So unfortunately, I don't have the numbers of where the neighboring property owners are in relative to the lake shore.
Yeah, normally I recall us going back and maybe we take, several houses to the, again, in this case, in the north and maybe a few to the south. And then kind of look at what the average is to see if it's in line with, the area and use that as a guidance. From my perspective, it looks like, that would be advantageous to the applicant, but.
Well, if you look at the properties, pardon me?
I was just going to say, I understand what Damien's saying. I know in the past we've looked at kind of the character of the neighborhood and, where are these existing homes, maybe in the general area relative to the lake shore. And you'll see in that criteria in your staff report, given the way the curvature of the lake shore is, the curvature of the road and just the location of the houses, this is a unique area on Jennings Bay where a few of the houses in the immediate vicinity are well beyond the 75-foot minimum lakeshore setback required by ordinance. But as you go further, specifically more towards the north, houses move rather quickly in towards that 75 feet, and then they all line up with one another. It's this unique area where these houses, there's a few of them here, 3 or 4 or so, that are pretty far back. I mean, if you take a look at the aerial photo, you could see the neighbor to the kind of southwest. If they were to ever tear that house down and rebuild it, they could jump out quite substantially based on the location of the houses on either side of them. So that's where this house is kind of in a unique situation where it's pretty hindered by that strict interpretation of that ordinance.
Yeah,
Well,
I tend to agree with Damien that, you know, I'd like to see the average. I'd like to see what we're doing to a little better view of what we're doing to those people, people's view if we approve this.
yeah, I went and looked at it, and it's kind of an odd situation because the house next to this would be, I guess, on the south side. It kind of cuts off their view of other people's backyards, not really the lake, because of the way it sits.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't see how this improvement is impeding on anyone's view of the lake. You know, I would be curious to hear from Mr. Haley what, you know, conversations have been with the neighbor to the south. And, you know, so that would be, you know, I think the person that's most
Okay.
affected by this.
Well, should we ask them to speak about this?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
boss. All right.
You got to give
my
your
name's
name
Jeff
and
Haley.
address.
Yeah, Jeff Haley, 1340 Morning View Drive. You know, one of the things that if you come out to the property to look, the neighbor to the north of me, his house is about 30 feet up. There's a huge hill coming down to my property. So the house to the north isn't impacted at all. My very next door neighbor, the way our houses sit, and we've got a very large tree that completely blocks that view to him. I don't think he'd notice it, especially in the summer, until the tree loses its leaves. But you know, we're all so far back from the lake. I mean, it's a long hike to the lake. And the curvature of our bay is such that, you know, the houses very quickly are out of that peripheral view of our house. So I don't, both my neighbors are fine with it. I did ask them, I did talk to them about it, and they said, yeah, sure, no, I don't see an issue with that. We're going out 6 feet from the existing deck on the screen porch is basically what we're doing.
See, Jeff?
How high off the ground is the screen porch?
One level.
Okay, so it's a second level screen porch.
Yes.
Okay.
And can I make one comment? This is Dan Hammond. It's speaking for Jeff Haley. I'm the contractor from Hammond's Custom Carpentry.
Okay, you have to give your address too.
16915 County Road 20, Mayer, Minnesota.
Thank you.
This screen porch will only be 4 feet beyond the existing deck that is already in the riparian line. Just so it's a screen porch. So there's no, it's all screen. It's just going to have some small posts in the corner. So it's not going to be, you know, siding and windows to block views if there was anything happening there.
But it will be 8 or 10 feet high, correct?
Yes, there'll be 8-foot walls on it. Yes. Or 8-foot posts. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a walkout, right? So
Yes, correct.
it's on the main level. It just happens to be 8 feet off the ground because it's a walkout lot.
Correct.
Any other questions for the applicants?
Just one other comment. And you know, my wife and I, we read the one person that expressed concern, and their concern, if you read it, is in general property, you know, getting variances. That's the way they worded that. They said, hey, we don't think it's proper for properties to get variances, blah 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 blah. So if that's the case, then I don't know, we wouldn't have any variances, I guess. But
Well,
it
and each
wasn't-
variance is, each one of these variances is different. They're not all the same either. This is a special case with the way the lake shore is here and how deep the lots are.
Yeah.
This may be a different story if you were all in a line 50 feet and you wanted to jut out right in front of somebody. So
Yeah.
does anybody else have any questions for the applicants?
Nope.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we need to have a public hearing. Is there anyone here on the call that wishes to speak on this particular variance for Jeffrey and Catherine Haley? If anybody's speaking and you're on mute, we don't hear you. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. The public hearing is closed. Thank you. Any more discussion on this?
I'll make a comment.
Somebody has a comment?
Yeah, Damien.
Okay.
Just using my practical judgment, based on the topography of the land, the position of the house, the neighbors' houses. I mean, honestly, I don't think that this is going to impede anyone's view. I don't think that, you know, I don't think that this is going to affect anyone. I think that the Haleys are definitely within their right, and we should be approving the variance.
Yeah, I'd like to build on Damien's comments. I think if you go on Google Maps and you kind of look at the formation of the bay that they're in and the houses that are around them, really, this is not an unreasonable request. And you can see the size of that tree on Google Maps, and it's rather large, and it takes up a lot of that corner. And to their point, they're really only talking 4 feet here, and you're talking a screened-in room. So I'm kind of with Damien on this one. It seems very reasonable. I appreciate the comment from the neighbor that they would like to see us not approve variances, but again, to your point, Madam Chair, really each one is unique. And in this case, I mean, they're already 180 feet from the shoreline. And given the view and the way that this property is laid out, I really think this is a reasonable request.
Okay, and I agree. I think the view that they're cutting off is the other people's backyards, not the view of the lake, which would be a different consideration.
It shouldn't be an issue.
Any other comments, discussion? If not, do I have a motion?
This is Peter. I'll make a motion. A motion to recommend that the City Council approve the requested riparian view shed setback variance for 1340 Morning View Drive based on certain facts outlined in the staff report and subject to conditions 1 through 5.
And Mike, I'll second.
Mike seconds it. Okay, we're going to go through the roll call. I say yes. Peter?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Damien?
Yes.
Steve?
Aye.
Gary?
Yes.
And Gary Pettis?
Yes.
Okay, we have a 7-0 vote. Nick, do you want to tell him what his next step is?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This item will be forwarded to the City Council for final action at an October meeting, either the 5th or the 19th.
Thank you. Okay, so that completes that public hearing on our agenda. The next item is a business item, a site plan review. Do you want to tell us about this, Nick?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The item here is a site plan review for a ground-mounted solar energy system for property generally located on the corner of West Highland Road and County Road 92. We have our applicant here who will probably go into some more detail, but I'll give a quick background of the solar energy ordinance and kind of outline the role of the Planning Commission in review of a site plan. And then, like I said, we'll probably have the applicant, or at least their representation, speak a little bit to it before we get too far. But solar energy, it kind of started, I guess, formally back in 2015. I think it even goes a bit beyond that earlier, with regards to residents within the city of Minnetrista expressing interest in doing ground-mounted solar. Roof-mounted had always been allowed, provided that you did not exceed the allowable building height for the structure in which they were mounted on. But, you know, staff started getting inquiries about ground-mounted. So back in 2015, a company by the name of Solarstone gave some presentations to both the Planning Commission and City Council to help educate the commissioners and the council members about solar, since it was a relatively new and hot topic at that point, so that they could be as best prepared when discussing a draft ordinance. And when that came about, time to do that draft ordinance, staff looked at, you know, several cities within Minnesota, primarily the metro area, looking, you know, everywhere from Brooklyn Park to Woodbury, you know, to Medina, cities like that, and seeing how they were addressing the growing renewable energy that is solar. So ultimately, it was presented, I believe, twice to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately forwarded to the City Council in July of 2015 for final adoption. So like I said, that ordinance has been adopted to allow for the ground-mounted solar. And in that ordinance, one of the areas it was seen as a permitted use was the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District, which is the present zoning of the property in question this evening. So when you have a change in use by more than 25% or a new use that doesn't require any other land use request, city ordinance requires the review of a site plan. Now, a site plan, the purpose and intent of that is to make sure that the use is complying with all the performance standards, such as setbacks, height, things like that, lot coverage, and a lot of that is quantifiable. You know, you have a certain building height you're allowed, you have a certain setback you're allowed, you have a certain lot coverage you're allowed. So a lot of that is quantifiable and pretty cut and dry. One of the big discussions I'm sure the Planning Commission will have this evening is screening, something that in the ordinance is kind of written subjectively, where it, you know, offers the flexibility and to figure out based on different lots and different sites what might be reasonable in terms of screening. Now, the applicant included with their application has shown a landscape plan that will show vegetation being proposed on all sides, varying in height, you know, from some shrubs to spruce trees. And like I said, the applicant maybe go a little more in depth on that, but that's something the Planning Commission should, you know, could focus on, and whether or not additional screening may or may not be required. So with that being said, in the staff report, the performance standards for solar have been included for the Planning Commission to review. And based on the information submitted by the applicant, it is felt that the request complies with the performance standards, and thus, you know, this should be forwarded to the City Council for their review of the application. And with that being said, like I said, our applicant is here if you have questions of them. Otherwise, I am here as a member of staff for questions.
You guys have any questions to start with?
This is Mike. I was just reading here about the wiring coming off of the site. Is it just a simple power pole and wire, or does it require sizable transformers like we see in some other electrical units around the county?
I can answer that.
Okay,
sure.
so we're going to have the applicant speak. You need to give your name and your address.
Yep. My name's Evan Carlson, and I live at 3515 Cedar Lake Avenue in Minneapolis. To answer your question, this type of project plugs into the existing distribution network that Excel operates. So it's just a normal pole. It goes into the three-phase power line on the west side of the property. And, you know, I could probably just kind of bring you up to speed on who I am. what I do and what the plan is here. I work for a company called IPS Solar. I'm their Director of Land and Legal. And my job involves siting and permitting solar projects. I have personally done more of these in the state of Minnesota than anybody else. We've done a lot of them, but this one is unique to me because I am actually personally the person who's buying the property to do it. This program, it's called the Community Solar Program. And it was created as a way to give people who don't have a good spot for solar panels access to solar. It's about being fair to people who rent an apartment or rent a building. Say you don't own your roof, you want to do solar. How do you get to do it? These people back in 2013 went to Excel and said, you know, solar is a good deal. We like solar. We want to do it. Excel said, okay, we will let developers like IPS lease land somewhere that is good for solar. We pay to build the project on the ground. And when we put power into the distribution network, it's just the regular power lines. It's not going into the transmission lines or high lines. It's just the lines that go to people's homes. When we put power into there, we get a bill credit, which is basically a coupon for that amount of power that we sell to another Excel customer somewhere else in the grid who doesn't have a good spot for solar. So they get treated by the utility as if these solar panels are up on their roof. Initially, those people who get treated as though the solar is up on the roof, they're called subscribers. And a subscriber to a garden needs to be located in the county that the garden is located in or in an adjacent county. So most of the development that we have seen in community solar has been in counties that are adjacent to Hennepin and Ramsey. But very little has actually been done in Hennepin County. So Hennepin County is a very desirable area to do it. The program is waning. We're running out of areas where we can, there's room in Excel's grid to build these things. And this is one of the first areas that was looked at for solar, but never got built. I looked at it myself and I wasn't able to find land to do it that, back in 2015. More recently, I took a look at it. And from an interconnection standpoint with Excel, it's a fantastic site because there's no other solar being proposed in the area. So it's just very easy to interconnect there. The other obstacle is permitting, and that's the point of going through this right now. Trying to put together a project that everyone can live with, whether or not they may not like it, but I'm definitely willing to cooperate with people. I have saved a build site there. I might build on it someday myself. And I do want to be a good neighbor to people, and I do appreciate their concern for aesthetics, and I'm willing to do what I can to make it more appealing. One of the other most appealing things about this, other than it being clean energy, is that we plant an indigenous pollinator-friendly seed mix underneath the array. And that's just kind of a benefit to all of these solar projects. We have to put something down to prevent erosion, right? So why not make it pollinator friendly, something that's good for the bees. And that is a deep-rooted pollinator seed mix that will increase the permeability of the soil. The row crops that are sprayed with pesticides kill the bugs and worms and things underneath the ground and depleted of its nutrients. The deep-rooted seed mix will improve that, and by improving the permeability of the soil and slowing down the velocity of water as water hits the grass and doesn't just roll down the middle of the row like it does with the row crop, it should improve the lake. And this is a big, this is a 40-acre parcel right next to the lake, so there is less pesticides going in the lake. Water qualities should improve.
My question is, why would you build it with so much wetland on this property?
Yeah, I would prefer a dry 40, but I had to find land. I went through your solar code with an X-Acto knife to find the properties that are usable, and it was like impossible to do. There are only a couple of them because you need to be in ag preserve zoning district, but as you just discussed, there's also ag preserve tax classification, and most of the properties that are in the ag preserve zoning district are also in ag preserve tax class. And it takes 8 years to unenroll from ag preserve tax class. So here's one that is not in the tax classification and is in the ag preserve district. So it meets the criteria.
Plus, isn't there a limitation on the amount of ground space you can take up anyways? And you're right at the number, it looks like, right?
Well, there's a ground cover ratio, and we're well under the ground cover ratio. So that's one benefit of just having the wetlands there. They're using up all the ground cover that we're not using. But we're still well under that. I think we're at 13 or so percent, and the ground cover ratio is like 25%. So
right. Yep. I mean, you're at 25% in the land oh, I see what you're saying. So reality is that you could use the wetlands because of the spacing of the arrays if it was available.
If we were to, be allowed to fill wetlands, theoretically we could, but we can't.
I see what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah.
So what happens, pardon me, what happens 20 years from now when these panels aren't operating anymore? What happens then?
Okay, so the array it basically consists of a bunch of I-beams that we hammer into the ground. They're like 4-inch I-beams that we go out there with a pile driver and hammer them into the ground. They're not affixed to the ground with concrete, so it's easy to remove the system after 25 years. Another reason why I'm interested in the parcel. I could remove it and restore the property to ag production, or it could be developed into some other use. But the point is, because we use minimally invasive procedures to build it in the first place, it's easy to remove. One of the issues that comes up at planning commissions is a security for removal. It's not unusual to require a developer to post a security in the form of a letter of credit or a bond or something like that, so that there's money set aside after 25 years to remove the project, even if the developer is not there. And if you were to make such a recommendation, although it's not required, I would not disagree with it. It's so commonplace at this point that I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, because how do you dispose of those solar panels at that point?
Well, they come with a warranty year one that they will produce 90% of the power after 25 years. So assuming that they still produce power, they still have value.
And if they don't?
Well, they have a warranty that they will.
Companies around. I have a question for Nick. I'm looking at this, and my curiosity is when the ordinance was passed for solar panels on agriculture, was for the farmer to go ahead and put up solar panels to help improve the profits and the land use of his property. I'm curious if this is a business for profit. This is solar panels being used to generate a profit. It's strictly a profit. My curiosity is that really what the intent of our present legislation is?
Well, Gary, when this ordinance was being discussed, the concept of a solar garden or community solar garden was discussed, and the way the ordinance was written, it was labeled as a permitted use in this zoning district, with the idea that this, if anywhere in the city were they to pop up, this is the zoning district in which we would see it.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I just wanted some clarification on that.
Well, and that's a good question, Gary, because when I remember looking at this ordinance, that it would be attached to somebody with a house.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It was going to be something I was going to use to better my business or better my living facility, not something that I was going to sell for profit.
Not a commercial.
Exactly. I wasn't going to grow electricity and sell it to the general public or whomever buys electricity.
It's really just to offset your own internal cost, right?
I'm sorry?
It was written to offset your internal cost of electricity, right? To offset what you were being charged for your electricity.
Well, exactly. Because now I, as for example, a poultry farmer, could now greatly reduce the amount of electricity that I need to heat these huge barns.
Right.
And that was my understanding of how this was written. It wasn't written that I was going to take my 80 acres and turn it into a electricity farm.
So I got a comment, Gary, to build on what you're saying. I guess in my mind, I'm sitting here trying to say, okay, how is this going to benefit my neighbors in Minnetrista that own 40 plus acres, right? And
it's not how I benefit my neighbors.
No.
How the ordinance is written.
No. That's not what I'm getting at. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But in the spirit of what you're saying about those neighbors that own property and they want to augment energy as a source of income within their farms, I guess one of the pros and cons in my mind that I'm weighing back and forth, because owning a business, I look at that, right? And I'm wondering, right, and this is a question that I have, is a community farm within our city bounds within this area, does that make it easier and more profitable for those farmers down the road to do something like that? And that's just, I'm wondering, like, where do we find the balance between these things popping up and all of a sudden we lost the farms because there's nothing but, solar panels as you're driving the road, you're not even looking at grass anymore. I get that, or is it where, okay, we've introduced within our community, a new option for farmers. And I don't have the answer for that. I don't know, because I'm not, I can't predict, where things are going to land. But I'm wondering where that balance is. And I'm just putting a question out there, not making a necessary comment about
the balance of that has nothing to do with my question. My question is, what is the letter of the law? And then whether the letter of the law agrees or disagrees with you is what is important to me. Because if it agrees with you, then I should agree with what you're trying to do. Now, I agree with what if I agree with what you're saying, that may be beneficial down the road and to other people. But if it's not within the letter of the law, then I need to disagree with you.
Yep, I agree. I agree with you.
That's why I'm asking. I need to know what the law is so I can make a proper decision on what this community has set forth as policy.
Yeah, and I think Nick already addressed that. He said that, hey, these are within the provisions of that law. So I don't think we're debating the law. I think I'm not trying to debate whether it's legal or not, because I thought that Nick stated that it was. Am I correct for that, Nick?
Yeah, my understanding of the discussions that were had when this ordinance was being presented was to have it be allowed in one area as a permitted use, with the idea of where would a community or a solar garden end up. and it's my understanding of the discussions and the way the ordinance is written and been presented is that the agricultural preserve was that zoning district. Now, if that's incorrect, I'm certainly, willing to hear what everyone else has to say, but that was my understanding of the intent of the ordinance.
As I'm reading this is the ordinance. The location, ground-mounted solar energy systems shall be limited to the side and rear yards. On double footage lots, solar energy systems must be located in the larger of the 2 front yards. I mean, that makes me think that it's attached to a house.
Yeah, that would be the opposite. I agree with what you're saying, Nick. And I think before, at least for me, before I could give a yes on this, I need a clarification on that. It'd be beyond, I think. And I understand where you're coming from because you don't have everything at hand right now.
I'd like to comment on this in 2 important ways. The concept of owners augmenting, their power consumption with solar power is precisely the point of community solar. This is about people who don't have the land to do it. It's an option for those people to do it. So
but the way we're reading the ordinance, that's not allowed.
Well, that's not true. I actually.
Well, no, we disagree. We don't know what is true. We disagree.
We know exactly what is true. I started with the ordinance and I worked backwards to find this parcel. I dissected the ordinances of every city within Hennepin County to identify about 5 viable parcels in the whole county where I could build one of these projects. And of those 5, I was able to find 1 where I could actually acquire the property and get the deal done. So this is not something that I landed on by accident. It was very carefully examined before I acquired the property. And there's really no question about a permitted use. It's crystal clear when a use is permitted by the ordinance, then it is allowed. And I don't see anything ambiguous.
And I'm going to disagree with you on the ordinance that she read to me, which would not allow a farm in your front yard. So I certainly need better clarification from the city council on this. I think you found a possible loophole, and I think you're trying to drive a wedge into it.
Madam Chair, David Abel here, Community Development Director. I've been here listening in. Can I speak here a second?
Yes,
absolutely.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so some points of clarification here. I think, Laura, the section of the ordinance that you're reading, as Nick laid out earlier, it's actually allowed by conditional use permits in all the other zoning districts that we have within our city. And you as a planning commission have actually looked at some of those and recommended approval for some of those conditional use permits in the ag district, and even in some of our residential districts, our residential districts, there's been people who have done smaller sets of these. And that's where
with a house.
When you're right, that's where exactly, and that's where you're referring to the front and the side yards, and that's where they're allowed in those districts, in those situations. As the applicants pointed out, and when the ordinance was written, the one district by itself, where under permitted uses, if you look at the permitted use table of ag preserve, it allows for solar. It allows for solar gardens. So it is a permitted use within that district. And the argument can be made that it is no longer then accessory because you're allowing a permitted use in the ag preserve district as long as you're abiding by all those conditions that Nick mentioned with the setbacks and the hardcover and so on. And so the way the ordinance is written, and that's why it's laid out for you in your staff report as such, it is a permitted use in the ag district. the focus of the discussion should be now onto, like Nick pointed out, the screening of such and whether it's adequate. The applicant mentioned whether you want to talk about a letter of credit or some sort of bond 25 years down the road. But again, the ordinance that was approved 5 years ago does allow this as a permitted use in the Ag Preserve District. So just wanted to point that out for point of clarification.
So Gary, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So again, going back to, I didn't want to debate whether it was legal or not, because I assumed that it was vetted through the, staff, and that was, I mean, they're a great staff, so they're going to make sure they're not going to put us in that position. I guess what I'm saying is we're trying to focus on the site and what kind of guidance we want to recommend to protect the neighbors, to protect the community, to protect the lake, to protect everything. And if we focus on the site, I'm wondering again, what would be the pros and cons for neighbor to the left, within that community, as well as, I think Laura brought up some really good points, like what happens to that developer, if this is now, we're inviting a business, a farming business of solar into the community, what happens if, it goes under? Are we as a city going to be responsible for, getting rid of this? So, I mean, I think those are all valid points, and, maybe we should, stick to focusing on just the site and what we can do to, kind of make good recommendations. That's where I wanted to go. I didn't want to debate about the legality of whether you could do it or not.
Well, I would like, can we say to the council that we would like better clarification, because has the city lawyer looked this over and agreed with that?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, David here talking again. I mean, this obviously, when it was adopted, the ordinance was produced by the city attorney. You certainly can ask for a point of clarification. I guess I would need to know more specifically what it is you're asking for clarification of. I think what you're asking is it considered an accessory use or a primary use? Is that the question that you're looking for? We can certainly ask for that, or you can clarify that.
Hey, David, this is Councilmember Mike Molitor. If I may, I have two questions that I think pertain to this discussion.
Thank you.
First of all, so I was around when we did the ordinance. I was on the planning commission. You mentioned that the solar garden is allowed. Do we have the definition of solar garden? I think that's going to hinge here, because words matter here, and this is more of a solar, what I would consider to be a solar farm. And when you look at definition, a garden, without getting into real specifics, you can kind of think about a garden as something you have in your backyard. It has a house attached, similar to Laura's question, comment. And without getting into specifics, we can kind of agree it's probably a half acre or less. Now, using the same analogy, when you talk about a farm's a lot different. It's, many acres, and it's not, you can have farmland without a building attached. And so I know when we wrote this, the intent was garden from a perspective of smaller and in a smaller plot. So I guess some of the legality might hinge on whether or not we have a definition of garden versus what this is probably more of a solar farm. And I'm not sure if you have that answer, if that's something we'll have to defer to the city attorney. The second question I have that hasn't been brought up, it concerns the tax value here. Considering that this is an agriculturally zoned land, I know that the tax values or tax amounts generally are less because you're putting in a crop every year, and the value goes up of the land or down, but you don't generally have improvements unless you're putting in drain tile or something of that nature. However, what's being proposed here, I don't have dollar figures here, but I'm guessing this is at least a 7-figure project, maybe 8. That I'm not sure, and maybe you can help address this. if they get taxed on that full value, as somebody would if it were their house and they're making that kind of investment, or do they receive a tax break because it's considered agricultural? Do you have any insight on that or any knowledge you can share? That's to you, David.
I don't specifically. That would be the Hennepin County Assessor's Office. Maybe the applicant, being that they've been part of these projects before, can speak more to it. My assumption is, similar to other home occupations or businesses, they do adjust the tax rate of ag properties if like for instance, if someone's running a business off of the property, they do look at that and just adjust that. But I would defer more to the applicant to see if with other cases what they've experienced with other properties.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, your taxes are a product of the use and the valuation of your property. The use should not, I'm sorry, the valuation should not change as a result of adding a solar project. There's a state statute on that, but the use can change. So think of the use is the rate, and the valuation is a number that goes into the rate. Also, there's a 1 megawatt gardens are not community solar gardens. By the way, this is 3 1 megawatt community solar gardens. They are limited in size to 1 megawatt. Excel does not allow for any developer to build more than 1 megawatt on a parcel at a time. Okay, so there already is a size limit in play here. The reason I'm doing 3 of them is because I am actually going to lease 2 of these to other companies. I'm personally buying the property, and I'm going to work with 3 different companies, including my own. So I think that there is a distinction between a solar farm and a community solar garden as defined by the state when they created the community solar program through Excel. And there are limits to the sizes of those gardens. If it's 1 megawatt or smaller, the taxes generally do not go up, but this is larger than a megawatt on a parcel. So I would imagine they would, but you would need to talk with your,
Yeah. So I got a question about that megawatt. Well, if there's obviously some type of restrictions not to have this big, huge solar farm versus a solar garden. How are you able to, on one wouldn't that be considered essentially 3 watts no matter how you slice it up? I don't understand that.
So the restriction is by developer, by applicant into the program with Excel. And so no company can have more than 1 application into Excel to do the project. I am the landowner, and as the landowner, I can work with more than 1 applicant. So I'm buying this property because I know the solar business, and because our company can do 1, but because I know I can work with 2 other Minnesota-based solar developers to do the other 2 simultaneously. Or you can do them one after the other. You can wait a year and then do another megawatt on the same property. But ultimately, the limiting factor, it's the grid.
I see this as an application to bring a farm where gardens are concerned. And we have an individual who's very bright and who has taken the time to source everything out to find a way that he can bring a farm into our garden community. And I give him credit for his intelligence, for his entrepreneurial drive, but I don't think that's what this community set forth in our ordinance.
Is there any way, Nick or Dave, that we can get a clarification from the lawyer to make sure? I don't want to just go bounding off and assume
Well, you know what? I think we can table this.
Good or not?
I think we can table this and put this out for information requests.
I don't believe that there is an issue before the council to table. It is a site plan review. I'm not applying for a conditional use permit.
Then I guess we should deny.
Well,
We can't.
I was also going to
deny
say,
it.
kind of where you're going with Gary, is shouldn't we are we afforded the opportunity to vet out some of what he's saying from Excel in regards to, use of, property, applications and stuff like that? I mean, there's a lot of information that's here that's being shared with us from the applicant, but we really haven't vetted anything out. And I mean, we're talking state, statute or, this, I mean, it sounds like so much information. I would personally kind of lean with where Gary's saying is that we at least need to vet out some of this stuff, and that's just to make an informed decision. From my perspective, that's what I'm asking, because I feel like I don't have all the facts here. And, I hate to be one-sided. I'm not saying what Mr. Carlson isn't saying is factual. I just would like to vet it out so we can interpret it to what we were, implying. So I don't know. That's just, I like what Gary was saying about at least we can, vet out some of the information shared. I don't know that I have all the facts to, make a decision. I mean, it's tough. I don't know.
As I've described this to Mr. Pettis, and this is the first time any of you have heard this, but I have a schedule. And if I'm not able to get this thing, I've told Mr. Pettis, if I'm not able to get this approved on time, I might lose the project. And but I'd like it if staff could clarify what is the question before the Planning Commission. There is no conditions attached to it. It is a permitted use, and this is an opportunity to review the site plan for completeness. And I've put in a lot of care into it. With the landscaping plan and the proposed screening, it's my baby. This is an important project to me, and I put a lot of care into it. And I feel like that is the point of this meeting, is to address those issues and the compliance with those issues, and I have complied with them. So
you're missing the point, sir. The point of a commissioner, for the planning commissioner, is to be a steward of the community as to what is the right and proper things under our guidance and under the restrictions and laws of the city to move forward. I am sorry if you made an investment that goes bad on you. I've done those in my life. Wait a minute. No, we've all done those in our life.
Handled to the letter.
No, please let me finish. There's not enough information here for us to make a steward of this city's decision, in my opinion, to move forward. I am not opposed to your plan as long as it meets what we've set forward. And we don't have that information. There are too many unknowns here.
No, you know that it's not true. You're opposed to this project.
I do know it's true.
You spoke on the phone. You told me you're opposed to the project. Am I right?
I told you I don't have enough information to grant this project.
Mr. Carlson, I can tell you, I have no bias to your project. I promise you, I have no bias to your project. I'm at all. And, as a person on the commission, and I would love to hear, consensus across the board to see if we've got all the facts. I literally am confused between what you said about having 3 gardens on one property, and that right there kind of made it full stop for me. I'm just, let me finish, sir. I'm just saying, for me personally, I just need to get more information and vet that out. And it's not about being biased with your project or anything. And I and we're not trying to do anything other than the site plan. If that site plan is 3 times what it was intended to be, I think we want to vet that out. That's all. And it's not. I don't think. I mean, at least from my perspective, I'm not being biased from your project. So
at the time,
just letting you know.
At the time,
Carlson,
you were allowed to do 5 megawatts on any one parcel at one time. So I can assure you that systems of this size was contemplated at the time the ordinance was passed, because the reduction to 1 megawatt didn't happen until 2016.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely appreciate the information you're sharing with me. Nick, do you want to comment, or can you validate any of that information?
Madam Chairwoman, it's going the way you want it to go, but we have a question about how this ordinance is being applied.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm a neighbor. Would it be appropriate for me to ask some questions to clarify?
Well, it's not really a public hearing, but I am allowed to let you have a comment. What's your name, your full name, and your address?
Martha M. Sullivan, 8500 West Highland Road.
Okay, and you sent the comment in that everyone should have seen it?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay. My husband, who's Glenn Hankemeyer, has talked to all the neighbors on Highland Road and West Highland Road. And the major concern is the claim that it will not affect the aesthetics, the view, or the, what was the third? Of the neighborhood. And because because of its visibility, where it's on a hill, I don't know that trees are going to prevent everybody that goes by it from seeing it. We can see the property from our house. The guy up on the hill in the big mansion can see it. Chuck by the cul-de-sac can see it. The property across Highland is for sale, although that is still ag preserved, so I'm not sure, what will happen with that property. My questions are, besides that, is the 13.7% per garden, or is that for total of 3 gardens?
Good question.
13.7% usage of the 36 acres.
Total.
Is that per?
That's total. That's total ground cover on
all 3?
Yes.
For all 3?
Yes.
And where is it going to be situated in the acreage?
I submitted a site plan and a landscaping plan.
Yeah, I can't understand it.
It's mostly, it's pretty much everywhere but the wetlands. I'm saving a building site on top of the hill, and then the dry ground is I'm going to try and develop into solar with either my company over the years or with other developers. It's an investment. I'm going to try and put as much into solar as I can. But that being said, I can't damage wetlands, and the wetlands lie on the south end of the property, the southwest corner. So that provides a larger setback from the road, and the northwest corner has a natural hill. So there would be some natural screening due to that. And that being said, I would never purport to tell a person that they should like the way it looks. Some people are entitled to their own opinion. Some people don't mind them. Other people really dislike them. And I
disagree with the fact that it's promoting the rural look to the area, which is Minnetrista's mission. And then there's all the people, obviously there's houses going up around here. And I don't think the people are moving to this neighborhood because of a solar farm.
So did you have any more questions, or?
Yeah. Why will it take 20 months for construction of it? That seems like an awful long time for us to be looking at construction.
Construction will take approximately 3 months.
What's the 20 months in the proposal?
It's a development cycle. So I have to get an interconnection agreement from the utility before I can build it. And that can take time. Hopefully it takes much less than that. I'd like to break ground in the spring. But the garden, the actual installation of the project only takes about 3 months.
I'm confused then. What's the 20 months for?
Buffer. I mean, hopefully we're going to get it done in the spring, but in development things go wrong.
Is it?
I have a question. What was the article in the Star Tribune on Sunday about XL Energy not fulfilling their parts of the deal for the solar gardens, the community gardens?
I read that article, and my understanding is that mostly has to do with the how long it takes to get an application done. So if you submit an application to Excel for a project, they complete any other. They used to study them all simultaneously, and now they're completing applications before they move on to new applications. That will not be relevant here because we're the only application on the line. So we'll get it through pretty quickly, hopefully, which is why I'm, buying it as an investment before the IA is in place, before the interconnection agreement with Excel exists.
And how much will you be charging to lease the property per acre? Excel is not going to be.
Usually it's around $1,000 an acre, but this is Hennepin County, and it's an extraordinarily good site from an interconnection standpoint, exceptionally. And in fact, I don't believe I've ever found a better site for it. And because of that, I can probably charge more.
How much will you be charging to lease the land per acre per month?
See, I'm the guy who actually negotiates that for my company. So I have to step out of that role, and it's going to be a conflict that I'm going to have to work out with my company. So I can't say exactly what that is because it's my responsibility to advocate for IPS and get a low price.
What did you put in your business plan? What figure did you put in your business plan? Because I know you have a business plan.
It is a conflict of interest for me to answer that. I hope you understand. I'm not trying to avoid the question, but my responsibility at IPS is to lease these properties. So I will have to step out of that role and renegotiate it with my company. Somebody else will have to be the person who does that. And I'm going to try and get as much as I can from them because I'm going to remove myself from that position and negotiate as the landowner. Normally, IPS would just buy this land, but I would love to have leased and get in other areas that, I pay rent on, but this is the only property I could find, and it's the only site. And I hope that it's not lost on people, the climate change argument. I mean, we are running out of places to develop.
You're talking to the wrong person. I have one more thing to say. This looks commercial. This looks commercial, not rural or residential. Bye.
Well,
thank you for your comments. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, we don't have any kind of public hearing here. So Nick, can we, we've thought about getting further clarification on this ordinance. Is that a possibility?
Madam Chair, could I speak, please?
Steve? Yep. Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'm looking at this a little differently than the rest of you guys. When I look at this looks like a site plan review for us to do. While I get both Gary and Damien's point about being stewards of the land, I guess I would go look to Nick and David both to tell us in our role as the Planning Commission, this looks like a lot of work's been put into this. And a lot of effort's been done on both the staff and the applicant side. And I just question, are we here to review the site plan, or are we here to review the legitimacy of the request? And I just look for some sort of guidance on that, right? Because when I look at it, this looks like he's complied with everything that we've asked him to do. It looks like it complies with everything that's set forth here in the documents. And the site plan and the landscaping plan look very thorough to me. And I live, pick your number, 5 miles from this site, and I've been by it a number of times. And while it may not be the most attractive thing that's out there, I don't mind them, right? I know there's a large farm over in Waconia I drive by, and while it's not attractive, it's to Evan's point, it makes you feel better about yourself and in the world that something's out there at least trying to address some of the power usage that we have. So just wanted to say my piece and see if we could get any guidance on what I've asked.
Nick?
Yeah, I can jump in here a little bit. Yeah, as I outlined in the staff report, I mean, the purpose of a site plan is when you have a permitted use that the ordinance allows, but it represents either a new use or a change of 25% or more, which is the case in this situation. So the Planning Commission's role is to take a look at the performance standards that have been outlined by the ordinance, not necessarily whether the ordinance is good or bad. Take a look at the ordinance as it's written and apply those standards, and take a look at what the applicant has presented. Now, as outlined in the staff report, it is the staff has felt that this has been satisfied, that the criteria have been met. There is one objective point, and that involves the screening of these solar panels. The language in the ordinance doesn't give any sort of quantifiable amount of screening, height of screening, etc., in part because every parcel is going to be different. You're not going to be able to, have two parcels that look alike. You're dealing with wetlands, with topography, with lakeshore, whatever else you may be dealing with. And that's where the Planning Commission can step in, take a look at the site plan and understand the plantings that the applicant has proposed and determine whether they feel that is sufficient or not. You could ask for taller trees, you could ask for more trees, you could ask for fencing, any number of things to control what he is proposing. But that is more or less the role of the Planning Commission. Now, if there's questions amongst the commissioners as to whether or not the ordinance is written well or is being applied appropriately, you certainly could pass those comments along to the City Council for them to consider in terms of how this ordinance should or should not be applied. I don't know if specifically the Planning Commission's role here is to pick apart the ordinance, specifically with something happening tonight. I think it's give the council comments about, hey, what do you like, what don't you like about the ordinance, so that they can take a look at the whole picture and make their best decision regarding, what is being proposed. This is the first one of this size that the city of Minnetrista has had to review. We have several other ones where, as most people thought, there is a house there and it's an accessory array where these people are producing energy in their solar panels and then using that to power their house. I'm guessing in some cases they're producing more electricity than they're using, and I bet they're selling it back. Now, they're not doing it on the same scale that this applicant is proposing this evening, but they're doing it back, doing something similar to that, I would guess. I don't know for a fact. I'm by no means a solar expert, but that's kind of my 2 cents on the situation.
Madam Chair, David here. I just wanted to say that yes, I concur with what Nick is saying there. That is absolutely correct. In that, you as a commission certainly feel free to make comments. As you heard earlier, we do have a council liaison listening, Mike Molitor. So he's listening to this, and he can, in addition to whatever you're saying here, if you want to have a specific motion to bring to the council or direction, we can bring that to him. But he can certainly bring up some of the concerns as when this goes to the city council for their review, where the city attorney would be present, of course, and discussing overarching policy with the ordinances as it's written. So I concur with exactly what Nick's saying there. Focus on the elements that he mentioned there that are before you tonight. If there's concerns and comments, we'll bring those to council, and those are overarching policy discussions that the council will have to have moving forward when it gets to them.
Okay, that's what I was hoping that we could. We don't want to just say, oh yes, it's all fine, and the way we passed the ordinance, it seems different now. So we'd like to pass those comments along. So I don't know if we want to make two separate motions to pass that information. Should it be more that formal, or can we just, I don't know, can we just tell Mike Molitor, our council rep, what would be the better?
Well, I would, Madam, go ahead, Mike.
Because what I was going to say is
I'd like to make
after
a
we do
comment.
that, then we'll go into the screening and all the other things that you originally intended this meeting.
You know, if it meets, if what this proposal is meets the letter of the law and so forth, I mean, that's one issue. Being part of the group that worked on the comprehensive plan, there is another issue, and I think the neighbor brought it up. We did a survey or had an open house, I forget which it was, if you remember, and the citizens came and told us the reason they lived in Minnetrista was because of the feeling of the ruralness. We spent a lot of time talking about where should development be, where should commercial development be in the city. And it was decided pretty much it's along the Highway 7 corridor as it relates to multiple housing and as well as shopping malls and so forth. Personally, if this all meets all the regulations, I can't argue with it, but I don't think it fits the spirit of what the people of Minnetrista voiced when we talked to them about planning for the next 25 years.
Hear, hear.
And so, therefore, if there's an issue to raise to the city council, I would urge them to take a look at what the citizens said, what we put into the comprehensive plan, and then decide or discuss anyway as to whether this fits what we're trying to do. And if the regulations in place say, yeah, this fits the law, then I think they ought to review the law. And
so, Nick, is the best thing to pass a motion if we have a motion that we want those things considered by the city council?
I have a motion.
Yes, no.
Madam Mayor,
Madam
Mayor, I have a point.
Okay, Chris, you want to speak first?
Not Madam Mayor, but yeah, I need to know who was talking. Was that Gary Vars?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm having a really hard time with people not telling me who's speaking.
Okay.
So that was Gary Vars. That
motion.
That last bit was mine, Gary Vars. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick, this is Mike. I have a question. Was there a sample motion language in the documentation that you sent us? And if so, what page was that on?
I believe there was, and that was, again, specific to the site plan, which, like I've said, based on the information submitted, complies with the way the ordinance was written. So there would be a motion in your packet to that effect. Now, to the effect of the language and its, you know, how well or not it represents Minnetrista and so on and so forth. I obviously don't have a template for that, but I would say as the planning commission, depending upon your views of the ordinance, I mean, if you can come to a consensus amongst yourselves of certain issues or topics, I certainly think you could contain that in a motion and see who on the planning commission that agrees with the items for the city council to consider. But I would say two separate motions, one specific to the request at hand, and then another one you certainly can pass along through a motion. Again, if there is a consensus, any comments, concerns, issues you have with the ordinance as it is written.
So since most of our conversation has been this part that's not in your recommendation, Gary, did you have a motion in regards to that? And we can get through this and then we can go on to the screening and all the other things.
I do. This is Gary Pettis, and I have a motion. And my motion is based on the information supplied by the applicant that this is not a garden solar system. This is a farm that is divided into 3 gardens. And I make a motion to deny this as it is applied.
Well,
And that if
I
the
don't think
applicant
we can
chooses to
deny it.
if the applicant chooses to reapply, they can.
Well, that's not really, we can't deny it, only the city council can, correct, Nick?
I deny to pass it
Correct.
on.
You're a recommending body. I mean, I don't know what you're recommending denial based on, I guess would be my
Well,
question for Gary Pettis.
Well, here I stated up front. The city council, the ordinance as I understand it says a garden. It doesn't say multiple gardens, it says a garden. The applicant stated that he is proposing 3 gardens, multiple gardens. That is not what the statute says is limited. It says a garden, not multiple gardens. And on that basis, I am saying that it should not move forward. It doesn't meet the requirements. It's not 1 garden. His intention is 3.
Could we do a motion where we ask the council to review if the ordinance is applied correctly?
I think the council can look at that and determine whether it is or not.
And then that would include your question about
No,
3
mine
gardens.
mine is to deny it.
Can I ask a question, Nick?
Damien?
So as I understood it, I see exactly what Gary's saying. I mean, it's 3 different gardens. So wouldn't he technically have to get 3 different, if he's leasing out the property into 3, I mean, could he even do that? Wouldn't it require 3 different approvals through the council? I mean, again, because that's what I understand what Gary's saying, and he said himself, these are 3 different gardens, and I'm a little confused there. And
Madam
I wanted
Chair?
some clarity. I wanted some clarity from what some of the comments that he made to make sure that we're validating that.
Before you have further discussion on this, you need to take action on the motion from Gary. Either somebody has to second it from Gary Pettis, his motion. You either need a second or it's going to die of a lack of a second. So, we need to continue on with that motion first, and then if there's more comments, that's fine. But you need to get the motion and the second done.
Okay, so do we have a second to Gary's motion?
Could we restate the motion so that I understand it anyway?
I'd be happy to. My motion is that the application is invalid because the applicant stated that he is going to have 3 gardens, not 1 garden or a garden, which the ordinance allows. So therefore, it's not valid.
Okay, so there's a statement. Is there a second for this?
I'll second it, Gary Vars.
Okay, so that's a second. Now we have to take a vote.
Well, now you can have further discussion on it if you want, or you can take a vote.
Because we can
I
amend
still don't
it,
see where
right?
it says, I don't see where it says 1 solar garden though. Gary, can you please point me to that direction?
It says a garden, not multiple gardens. And you told us that you are going to have a garden and sell 2 other gardens. So that's 3, sir.
I'm investing in the land to put as much of it into solar as possible. And there is no limit contained in the ordinance on how many gardens can be there.
It says a garden. It says a garden.
6 half-megawatt gardens. You know, there's nothing in the ordinance to support that at all.
Well, we disagree on that, sir.
How is it any different than if he was a farmer and he was renting the land out, right? He doesn't have to rent out the whole farm, and he complies with the coverage of the ordinance. So
we're talking about a solar garden, not a farmer. We're talking about a garden, one garden, and I believe from the way I read this that the intent was not to have a farm. And dividing into gardens just allows me a loophole to make a farm. So if I had a large enough piece of property, I could have 150 gardens.
the garden restriction is coming from Excel Energy, not from Mr. Carlson, I believe.
But that,
Well, I guess
I don't care who the restriction is from. Our ordinance says a garden.
Where does it say that? I'm curious.
No,
I must be missing it.
It says solar energy systems under the.
I don't think we use the term garden in our solar energy ordinance. I don't believe the term garden is used and is not defined.
But we do use side lots and rear yards.
Yes, and that is in the case of where it is an accessory use. He's actually proposing it in a more restrictive location than the way the ordinance is presented. Your yard is the area between your lot line and the setback, i.e. closer to the roads, closer to the property line. He's well within the building pad, so he's even more restrictive than that language that is spelled out in the ordinance, again, which focuses on the situations where it is an accessory use.
And he's not going to have a building. Yeah, this is
At this time, he's not proposing one.
Yeah, and
nor does he have to have one.
Well, it's very convoluted, and
can we just ask for clarification from the council?
Madam Chair, as David talking here again, you've got a motion in a second. I recommend we clean that up and take a vote on that.
Okay.
And then let's move forward on to if you're trying to get some clarification, like I said, you can make that known. I don't believe it doesn't. It sounds like a couple people are on the same page, but not everyone. So I think if you have a motion in mind for clarification, you can bring that up and we can bring that to council, and I'd recommend taking the vote because I'm not sure everyone's exactly on the same page there either. And then we need to move on. And there is a motion in your packet that's recommended for this item specifically. It's on page 27. There's the recommended action and the motion for city council that's laid out for you in your packet as part of the staff report.
Okay, well, let's get this other part cleaned up and then we'll go to that. So we have Gary's motion and a second. So we need to vote on that particular motion. And I'm going to vote no on the motion.
One at a time, please.
This is Mike. Can we have a reread on the motion, please?
Okay. Gary, you want to read it again?
I don't.
Okay, I can reread. I can reread it. I wrote it down.
Okay, thank you.
Gary Pettis motioned. Gary Vars seconded the motion to deny the application due to that it's invalid because the applicant wants 3 gardens, not 1, like it is stated in the ordinance.
Okay.
Did I get it, Gary?
Yes.
I'm going to do a roll call. And I'm going to vote nay on this because I just want clarification. I don't want to say yes or no. Okay, Peter?
I would say nay as well.
Mike?
Nay.
Damien?
Unmute.
Can't hear you, Damien.
I would lighten the mood a little bit. I'd say nay. I want to focus on the site and giving the council some specific guidance on what we think we should be, how that site should be applied. I think we need to focus on the site and not do the council's job in trying to determine if it's if the law is actually being applied or not. So.
Okay, Steve?
Nay.
Gary?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 nays and 2 yes or ayes. so it does not pass. I would just like to make a motion that we ask the council for clarification on how the ordinance, if we can have the city lawyer look at how the ordinance applies to this particular piece. That's what I'm asking in my motion. Is there any second to my motion? Okay,
I'll second.
no second?
I'll
Who's
second.
gonna say?
I mean,
Gary?
Was that Pettis?
Yeah, it was
Yes, Gary
Pettis. We need to move forward on something on this.
Well, I'd like to, if you don't like it, then we're done with this and we go on to the actual part that Nick and Dave would like us to do.
No,
Okay,
I
so
want clarification as well. If not denied, I certainly want clarification to come to a more educated decision.
yes. So I'm going to go through a roll call because we have a second. So I'm going to say yes on mine, and then we have Peter.
Wait a minute. Can I ask a question? So is your motion going to be that? I'm confused on your motion. So
My motion is to ask for clarification on
Steve.
how the solar ordinance applies to this project.
So if your motion passes, this is Steve again. Sorry, Chris.
Thank you.
Yep. So if your motion passes, though, we have. Are you? What's going to be the motion on the actual site plan? Then are you?
Well, then we'll go on to a different motion. So we're going to have two separate motions. We're just going to clean this up and make sure the council,
Right.
reassures us that this is correctly applied. And then the second part, we'll talk about the screening and all the other things that they're looking for. So we're going to have two different motions.
But what I'm hearing in your motion is you're asking for clarification from the council, which then pushes our vote down the road. That's what.
No, I think we can still pass a motion as far as the screening. Can we not ask for clarification and still discuss the site plan, Nick?
Well, if you push it,
I would say yes.
Well,
I
wait a minute.
maybe if you can be more specific about, if you can at least be more specific about the clarification you are requesting, what part of the ordinance, is, ambiguous or not clear or something to that nature. I think the council would appreciate if you could be as detailed as possible in your concerns with the way the ordinance is written currently.
But excuse me, Nick, but would you not want that after you take your motion on what staff put? You'd want the clarification after that.
Logistically, yes, that would make sense.
We're going to table this motion until after we go over the screening. Is that what you're saying, Chris?
Correct. I think that would make it cleaner to the council.
Logistically, that would make sense. You would make a recommendation based on the information that has been presented and provided to you, and then afterwards you can then make a motion seeking clarification on the application of the ordinance as it pertains to this property or properties in general to, further help in the future regarding situations such as the one that's presented to us. And again, I would suggest being as detailed as possible.
Or our concerns about the current proposal, right, in front of us, and how we think it might or might not be in violation of the spirit of the law. Is that what you're, right? That's what I'm thinking, at least.
That's the way, yes. I was just going to do it in the different order. So just because I wanted to get it cleaned up and be done with it.
Yeah, I was confused, Laura. I wanted to make sure we at least voted on this action tonight to give the applicant some conclusion, or at least some idea of where our heads were at, instead of pushing this off to the council and then revisiting this next month. I just think I don't think that's fair to the applicant and all the work he's put in. And I'd like us to come to some resolution about what's in front of us.
I agree that we can talk about the setbacks, et cetera, and then it's going to go to the council and they're going to have to talk to the lawyer. Maybe they're just fine with it the way it is.
There's a whole other side of this, the whole best interest of the community that really is at a council level thing, I believe. I mean, we could put our input in and whatnot, but
I'd like to give input. So, okay, so now we're going to change gears And we're gonna go to talk about what Nick and David actually wanted us to talk about. So is there
Madam
any?
Chair, Madam Chair,
Motion has been voted on.
Can I table
Right.
that? And do I have to take a vote on that?
David, can you help me out here? Do we have to rescind that motion and then we can bring it back later? Since we have a motion and a second, I think we have to rescind it. So do we not?
Correct. Yes, Chris, and because technically they've motioned and seconded, and I believe someone she already started roll call. I think you either finish it out or rescind it and get it off the table to clean it up. Yes.
Right. So you can rescind the motion and then you can bring it back up however you want after you make your motion or whatever action you take on the application itself. And then you can ask the council for its clarification and give your list of what you want clarified.
Okay, so.
Or what they should look at.
Okay, so how do I rescind my motion then?
You just ask to rescind your motion and then Gary's gonna have to second that.
Okay, I'll rescind my motion until after we do the discussion on the,
you don't have to have all that.
action on in our packet.
You just have to rescind it.
You just have to rescind it. Pettis, you rescind your second.
I do.
Okay, so now we're gonna go on. That motion has been rescinded. I hope to come back to that. We're gonna go on and talk about the screening, etc., setbacks, whatever we see in the site plan. Any discussion on this?
This is Peter, Madam Chairman. One of the questions I have is that it is kind of it's a low area and then you have the hill. And of course, solar needs sun. So it seems like you're not going to be able to totally screen this. And so I'm wondering kind of how much you can do. I've read this, but it's not, totally clear to me. So maybe if the applicant could talk about that a bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah. It's on a hill. And if you're at the low end of the hill, you're going to be able to see over what's on the fence. So you'll be able to see solar panels from some perspectives. Looking at the top of the solar panels from that perspective is generally, considered by many not to be as problematic as looking at the side or the back. Because if you're looking at the side or the back, you're seeing more metal than instead of like the surface of the solar panel. So doing what we can do on the sides is pretty much the best we can do. Your ordinance is pretty robust in its application requirements. So we've actually done, put together a proposal for the types of trees that would be included. We actually had to hire an arborist to come up with this plan. And it uses a few different types of plantings in different areas, mostly pine trees, and then a lower lying shrub in the wetlands. But in that part, the panels are set back the furthest from the point of view. The other thing that's really one of the better things to screen with is the actual fence itself. There needs to be a security fence around these. It's electric code. And some jurisdictions have required that fence be a deer style fence, like a wood post with squares instead of like a aluminum or steel regular fence. And it has a bit more of a rural characteristic. It's the type of fence you might see in holding in animals. So that's one thing we could do. And if there is a preferred, type of plantings, I'm all ears, but I'm not an expert on plantings, and the person who prepared the landscaping plan is. So
they're going in at about 6 feet.
You know, I think it depends on the plant. Let's see here. Where's my landscaping plan?
So you'll always be able to see over the wetland, because how come you only put shrubs there?
Because it's wet and they'll grow better there. And we wanted to not only make sure that when we plant these things that they are, you know, big, good trees, we want to make sure that they're going to do well and, you know, and grow, because over the course of 25 years, you know, they'll get bigger. We want them to do well. So the three types of planting I'm pulling up here are a Black Hill spruce, a Norway spruce, a balsam fir. There's I don't even know how to say this, Abies balsama, Pica abies, and Pica luca. I don't know what these plants are. I mean, I'm not an arborist, but these are the
Right,
plants.
they're all pine trees, but the shrubs are never going to be higher than 4 feet. So everybody driving along Highway 92 is going to see these. There's no screening there is what there is.
Yeah, you know, if we could have got pine trees in there, I would have. You know, directed the, I mean, I told the arborist right away when we started, let's not hold back. Let's give them the most robust screening plan that we can do. I want plants that are going to do well, and not just, you know, plants that would die. So that's
No, I understand that. It's just that basically that's a 4-foot screen. Your fence is going to be higher than the bushes are.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But that area does have the big setback because of the wetland. So, you know, the panels are, well, several hundred feet away in that particular spot.
I think we should ask for some increased height to whatever is put along that road, or at least ask the commission to look at that.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, or do something along the wetland.
Well, couldn't you do a berm or something along that to kind of shield it as well, right?
That,
So
that could be.
I mean, it's a wetland. Maybe a fence, maybe like a more of like a privacy style fence.
Yeah, but none of that's gonna, because that's the low spot in the back of the property is the highland. So no matter what you actually end up doing, you're never gonna screen it.
Laura, I got a comment.
4 feet isn't much.
No, the plants do better if they're planted. You know, if you uproot a more mature tree and move it, they don't always do as well. So, you know, again,
Well, that's the mature height, I hate to tell you. They're gonna be, I think it says it's 1 foot high or 1.5 feet high, and the total height it ever gets is 4 feet.
Right, the pine trees are quite a bit taller than that. But yes,
right, they're 4 feet, and they're 6 feet you're putting them in at, and they'll grow, 40 feet tall. But that lower southwest corner by the wetland is all shrubs.
Right.
We would want to request something in the pine tree area along that would get to the 30, 40 feet high instead of the 4 feet high.
Or deciduous or something.
Yeah, something. I don't know what the proper thing is, but something certainly that would give at least a 15 to 20 foot height, not a 4 foot.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree to plant them, but I can't guarantee that they're going to do well.
Right, and is there something you can do around the wetland? You have it on the edge of the property.
That gets pretty dicey.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So according to the ordinance, when I was reading here, when it comes to screening, ground-mounted solar energy systems must be screened from view to the extent possible without reducing its efficiency. So, I mean, and that says not limited to walls, fences, or landscaping. So I think that, essentially, when we go back to the spirit of the, the law, I think we should definitely, I think we can raise that as high as possible. So that way it's not in view from the road or the neighbors, right?
I would hope so.
So I think we should do a combination of both.
Both what?
Fence and landscaping.
Well, he's got to have a fence. And let's see what else. And you're leaving the trees that are by the lake. So really, the only place you have short shrubs is in the wetland down in the south. I think that's the way I'm reading this, in the southwest corner.
That's right. And the reason for that is not any reason that I selected. It was the direction of the arborist. We just wanted something that'll do well there. If you want to try pine trees, we can try them. I just don't know if they're gonna.
Well, not necessarily pine trees, but you could get taller bushes than 4 feet.
Yeah, that's.
You can get some swamp. You can get some swamp willows that grow about 30 feet high.
There's plants that'll grow in the wet part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would consider other plants. I can ask for some more input on that. Dogwood is a shrub that we've used before a lot of the time, and dogwood does get to be maybe 6 to 8 feet. And it's like hardy as hell. It really does well like everywhere. So it's something that we like to use. Not
have them look into swamp willows. I'm serious. They love the wetlands. They grow 30, 40 feet high. They are a wonderful, wonderful tree for something like that.
Laura, I have a question. This is Councilmember Mauder. What specific area are you requesting to change in the shrubs?
I'm looking in the southwest corner, and I can't exactly see which shrub they've chosen. Because they're just dots.
Okay, that's on the intersection of Highland and 92, Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Where the wetland is.
Well, right, that's where I'm going with this comment. You're really not screening anything there because it's already wetland and there's not going to be any panels there. So why is there concern about that? I mean, I'm not even sure if there's a need for any kind of a.
It goes up the hill, so you're going to see it up the hill. I'm just trying to keep it from as you drive by on the road even.
I think that's unrealistic. I think it's a large open field. I drove by there today. The panel layout is going to be visible somewhere, somehow, by somebody. And
it's going to be visible.
We can do what we can to screen it in those areas that the applicant has suggested, but we're not going to fix the screening to the point where you're not going to see them. It's part of.
No, I agree with that. No, I agree with what you're saying.
With Mr. Carlson taking his best efforts to take the suggestions we've given, Willows and others, to do the best he can to minimize visibility and run that more detail if necessary before the city council. But I think I'm ready to move on with the motion.
Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to make a comment on?
Well, I like the idea of what somebody said, making the fence a certain height.
Well, it's going to be, according to this, is it going to be 8 feet?
It's 7 foot
higher, making the fence higher, I think is what somebody commented.
Well, right now it shows it being 8 foot.
Do you guys feel like 8 feet is enough? I mean, it should be 10. What are you thinking?
No, I don't.
Just to let you know, I think our current ordinance only allows 7. Nick or David, perhaps you can elaborate on that.
That's correct. Yes. You know, I guess to the extent of going above and beyond that, I think typically it would essentially become more or less a structure and have to meet the setbacks. You couldn't go up to the property line at any higher than 7 feet.
So this 8 feet is incorrect on the drawings then?
I would say so.
I guess it depends on where he's putting it. I mean, if it's far enough away from the property line, I would think an 8-foot fence would be no different than, you know, an accessory building or a structure or something. But I mean, if it's right on the property line, it should be no higher than 7 feet.
Okay, so then the site plan isn't right now.
Yeah, there's section there along 92 that are pretty close, right?
I'm just asking, is the fence 8 feet?
The electric code requires a 7-foot fence, and that's what we typically.
So it's 7. So it's not 8 feet, it's 7, but it's still pretty tall.
Okay.
It's gonna be taller than your shrubs. Okay, anybody else? No more discussion? Do I have a motion?
This is Mike. Madam Chairman, I would move that we recommend the City Council approve the requested site plan for a ground-mounted solar energy system at the PID identified on page 27, incorporating also the conditions listed there 1 through 5.
May I ask one thing really quick before I guess we get too far along? I thought it was a good point about the financial surety regarding the potential removal of these panels 20, 25 years down the road. I just want to make sure the Planning Commission remembers that, and I think that's a valid condition you could add. It's outlined in the ordinance to allow for such, and the applicant has expressed no objection to said request. So I just thought maybe it'd be worth bringing that back up, since that wasn't discussed a long time. That was discussed a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right, Mike, did you want to add that?
Yes, this is Mike. Mike, I'd be willing to add that as a 6th condition if that works for your language, Nick.
Chris, are you able to capture that?
What I was going to comment on is that surety should equal the estimated cost of removing the solar panels. I think we should be very specific in that, or adopt specific language to sub 4 in the ordinance.
And say disposal of, because they could be hazardous waste. Not hazardous waste, but special waste. So I would say removal and disposal.
And I
Do you
will say
want
in
that
terms
as
of
an escrow?
Yes, please.
Or I guess I'm confused.
It says
a
surety
letter of
bond
credit, is that?
or letter of credit.
And I guess in the amount, I mean, I know in other situations where we take letters of credit, it's usually in the amount of 150% of the projected cost. I mean, is that's something the commission should consider as well? I mean, since we're looking at something not happening likely tomorrow, it would be something happening projected 20, 25 years down the road. I mean, I think you take that increase to deal with inflation and you know, competitive bid process, et cetera, and reminded that this is all in the event that the applicant doesn't ultimately remove any abandoned or non-functioning solar.
Nick, I'm not positive if a letter of credit, and David, if you're still on, maybe you can help with this, but does a letter of credit extenuate for 25 years, or is it going to have to be an escrow?
I just put it in a form that's acceptable by the city attorney, and we can work out those details as we move through this. just a form of security for the purposes of the motion that will be reviewed and approved by the city attorney.
Okay. So Mike,
Okay.
that's added to your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
How have we ensured that we've requested the city council to look to make sure that this qualifies under the letter of the law and that it meets the wishes of the city that Gary Vars talked about when we looked at doing the comprehensive plan for the next 20 years?
Gary, that's going to be a separate motion. This is just
Okay,
on the site plan.
that's fine. I just needed to know where it
Okay.
comes in. Thank you.
Okay, because we rescinded that one and we're going to bring it back and
Nope,
then
that's
we'll vote on
fine.
that. But
That's
we're going
fine.
to finish this. So Mike made his motion.
Do we want to add any language? Hang on a second, Madam Chair. Do we want to add any language about increasing the coverage in the southwest corner or the?
I would like it to be 6 feet, the equivalent height of the fence.
Right. So do we want to add that to the motion?
Could we add that, Mike? Would you add that?
Mike, Steve, can you say what it is you're asking for? I'm not sure.
Just
Go ahead. Go ahead, Laura.
Just to increase the height of the bushes in the southwest corner to meet the height of the fence.
I have no objection.
Okay, so that's added to the motion.
Is that a 7th condition on the list then?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Anything else? Do I have a second then?
This is Peter. I'll second it.
Okay, now we're going to do the roll call. On this motion, I say yes. Peter?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Damian? You're not talking again. Steve?
Yes.
Gary Bars?
Yes.
And Gary Pettis?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes the changes we've made on the site plan. Okay, now we're almost done. I still would like to make my motion that, and now you're going to make me come up with very specific items here, aren't you?
Probably.
That this proposal meets the letter of the ordinance that was intended, and Gary, and meets the comprehensive plan for the city of Minnetrista. I would like clarification from the council. Does that work, Nick?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I guess I want clarification of what you just said because I'm not quite sure. So you want, if I understand it, you want clarification of the letter of what?
Well, the way the ordinance is written that it meets the ordinance as it's written and intended.
Can I give you an example?
Can I break that down a little? I think that what she's saying is similar to what I'm saying. Is that we're reading the ordinance to say a garden, meaning that it's for a farm, an agro business, or a homeowner to use, not to be a sole entity.
Right, that it was intended to be part of somebody's home, their house, their farm, whatever.
Or their farm to reduce their costs and to help the environment, not something to be a
commercial,
a singular for-profit business just around selling electricity.
So basically for single family use versus commercial or for-profit.
Or a single, not a single family. I guess if you were to call, you would describe a farm as a business.
So Gary, can I add to that? So
Yeah.
in the ordinance, it says, when you're talking about aesthetics, I think you want to ask the council to validate whether the ground mounted solar energy system should be associated with the principal structure versus being a commercial business.
Much
And I
better
think
stated.
that's
Thank you.
what's not clear.
No, much better stated.
To the
Yeah,
actual.
that's probably a better way to say that. And then
Damien, would you mind repeating that?
Pardon me?
Could you have Damien repeat that?
Damien, you wanna make the motion, Damien?
I don't, because I don't know what that 6 other things that I want to take away from Mike. So, but I do want to say that you probably should make. So when you look at the ordinance and you go to F and it talks about aesthetics, it says, on the bottom, the last sentence says ground mounted solar energy should match the principal structure to the maximum extent possible, but essentially it's associated with the principal structure versus being a solar farm. And that's what's not clear. And, is he required, and again, we go back to the previous, is he required to have a principal structure on the property? And is that part of the requirement? And I don't know. I mean, we should, ask the council to clarify that. So.
Yeah, because exactly. It looks like it's meant to be an assistance to an existing business, not a business, and not a standalone business itself.
Well, I don't think it says anything about being business. It just says structure. So let's not. I don't want to interpret it.
No, that's fine. You're correct. That's fine.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're referencing that and just have clarity. If we're going to ask for clarity, we should be very specific to what we're clarifying. And it would be, whenever it refers to ground mounted associated with the structure, was the intent to have it associated with the structure versus being a standalone commercial business. That's what I'm not sure about.
Chris, can you write something up like that? Are you getting this?
I'm working on it, yes.
Thank you. Gary, you had to say something?
No, I just want to make sure, this is Gary Vars, I just want to make sure that we do get to the issue, and I think we're getting to it, of does this development fit the spirit of what Minnetrista said they wanted to be in the future? And all I can envision as I sit here on County Road 26, thinking about driving down 92 to see a whole lot of solar panels. It looks like about 12,000 of them from looking at this thing with a big fence around it. And, it just doesn't look like what the citizens said they want Minnetrista to look like. So even if it fits within the strictures of the ordinance, I think somebody ought to take a look at that. Because I think we're going away from what the citizens said they want this city to be.
Chris, did you get something written up?
Okay,
and then
so
you could add
yeah, I do.
in the comprehensive plan?
Well, let me try this for a minute. So I have a motion by Sandholm. We don't have a second yet.
No.
For clarification, for several clarifications, one being to validate if the principal structure as a farm, if you need to have the principal structure for the farm, should there be a primary structure? Or was it to be a standalone business? And then another point of clarification was, does this site plan meet the city's mission statement? And that mission statement does have the rural character and things that I think that Gary Vars was trying to.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Come across.
So that's going to be my motion, and now the question
unless somebody has something else to add.
Okay, does somebody have something else to add? I wanted to make it fairly simple. So I would like to go for a second.
I like simple. I'll second
Gary
that.
Vars.
Okay, who did I get a second from?
Gary Vars. Damien, you got it.
Well,
Damien,
I heard Gary Vars.
okay,
Gary
take
Vars
Gary
first.
then.
Okay, sorry
so
about
now
that.
we're gonna vote on this. And I'm gonna say, yes.
Discussion, please.
Okay. Pardon me?
I say discussion, always offer discussion. You have a motion and a second. Don't go to a vote
Yeah.
without discussion.
Okay.
You got to have a discussion. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's have a discussion. Does anybody have any comments?
I understand, this is Mike, I understand what the concerns are in terms of the look and the impact in the rural community. I want to be careful we aren't stretching the point where we are dictating to a landowner how they will use their rural property to the point where it might be unproductive. I mean, are we going to at some point describe the nature of crops that we find acceptable because they have less pollen or whatever? I mean, are we going to overstep at some point guiding what an independent business owner wants to do with their property, which is intended, as most farm property is, to produce revenue? This is a crop in a sense. I know it's not going to fit your definition of it, but it does produce revenue. And I think anyone has an opportunity to bring that notion to us, and we can certainly debate it as we are here. But I want to make sure we don't close that down with some notion that says, if it doesn't look like the farm down the street for me, it's not a farm. I think that's overstating the usefulness of what we're trying to do. My discussion.
I think that's up for the city council.
I hear you. This is Gary Vars. I hear your concern, and I don't think this is going that far. I mean, given what you just said, I could put a junkyard behind that fence, and I'm sure that would be, probably would fit in. And I don't think we'd want that in this area. So I'm not. I don't want to be dictative about it, but at the same time, we have to protect the value this community has for its citizens, and it ain't all about money.
Well, and I just want the council that know that we have these concerns, I guess is what I want to pass along. Yep. And I know Mike's listening.
No, I'm okay.
So that's okay. So we're do we have more discussion?
The only comment I was going to make is that, we're living here. Mr. Carlson's not planning on living here. We're living here. So it's really hard for him to understand like what we're saying about well, maybe not that hard, but, hopefully he can relate to what we're saying about keeping the spirit of the community. So
I understand.
That's all I wanted to comment about.
I appreciate that perspective. I do. I intend to be a business owner in your community. That's what I'm doing, and I do want to make it as appealing as I can. I don't like it when people are. I don't want to make anybody's home feel less appealing, but I do think solar is important, and what it is, they can't make them look like something else.
Right. And I will say that I have solar on my barn, so I'm not anti-solar or anything, but it's just a small amount on my barn. Okay, so any more discussion? Okay, can I vote now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, roll call. I'm gonna say yes to that motion. Doesn't mean anything, but we can ask the council. Peter?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Damien?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Gary? Vars?
Yes.
And
Yes,
Gary
yes.
Pettit?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 7 yeses. We'd just like to pass those concerns along to the council. So I think that ends that discussion. Thank you, everybody, but it's a big deal, I would expect. And then we can close that. Now we've got informational items, staff reports. Anything you want to tell us, Nick?
Laura, Nick, you want to let them know what's next steps?
Yeah, so given the
pardon
lengthy
me.
discussion we've had here this evening, The next two council meetings are October the 5th and October the 19th. This item will be forwarded to the city council at one of those meetings. Without the certainty of those agendas, we'll have to take a look at that, but one of those two meetings.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay, now we will go on to staff reports.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all your hard work on this. Yep.
Thank you. Okay,
So
Nick?
yes, for staff report, I would let the commission know the next scheduled meeting is October the 26th. As of now, we do have a couple applications in for review, so there will be a meeting on the 26th. Hopefully, everyone can attend, and I guess that's pretty much the big items I have for you.
Okay, I guess anything from the council, Mike?
Couple of things. As you likely know, we've set the preliminary levy for 2021. We are discussing the allocation of the CARES money that has been received by the city. Also looking at our road projects for 2021 as well. Letters have started to go out for that, for those proposed areas. And we're also having discussions about the access to high-speed internet throughout the city and what can and cannot be done in that regard. I think those are some of the highlights. If there's any questions, I'll stand for questions.
Okay.
Mike, could you give us a little more detail on the high-speed internet and what's being looked at and what's driving that conversation?
Couple things. I think primarily in the rural parts of the city, internet services is not obviously optimal. We have a franchise agreement with Mediacom that lays out parameters as to when and where they will expand their network. And so we're looking at what is required in that and what we can require above and beyond, or also we have to renew that contract or look at possibly renewing that contract. Obviously, it's, when you're dealing with these type of providers, just like any type of business that's serving a retail customer, they need a certain amount of density in order to make it possible and make it profitable. And obviously, when in the rural sections of the city, that density just isn't there. But on the flip side, we're kind of tied in terms of what we can do in terms of funding that. So trying to figure out what other options there are to kind of move that along. But that's kind of the gist of it. I don't know if there's anything specific that I missed that you may have questions on.
Yeah, I guess I was just looking, Mike, to see if this is looking to be like a city-funded activity, or if this is something you guys are just trying to bring some additional vendors to play to help out some of the more rural customers.
It would be both. Obviously, first and foremost would be to try to get additional vendors to come into the market. But through the point I just made about density, all vendors are going to have that same concern, right? They need to have a certain number of customers to make it profitable. But we are looking at surrounding cities to see if there's service up to our borders that can be extended. In terms of, I don't think the city has a flavor or any appetite, I should say, for trying to, build out its own network and manage that. That's an undertaking that would be beyond our resources.
Okay.
But in terms of, providing incentives, that's been discussed. I know the city attorney has expressed some concerns about the legality of that. So we have to make sure that if we're providing any kind of financial incentives, that they comply with all applicable laws. And that's part of the problem that we're running into is the law. Generally, these laws are written at the federal level. and they haven't been updated for a long time, and so they really don't speak to internet per se. They actually speak to telephone and cable providing, and obviously, having those two services can lead to internet service, but the laws haven't been updated in that regard. So it gets to be a little bit tricky to address this from a legal perspective, because the federal laws that govern this just haven't been keeping up with the technology. So, part of this is also wireless, and such as like 5G technology. But again, it's a private enterprise, and also for that kind of small cell technology to work, you kind of have the same issue. Again, it's not the big wires that you're putting in, but you're putting in smaller devices in scattered locations. But again, the providers, whether it be Verizon, Sprint, or whoever, they want to put them in areas that are going to serve a high number of people, which is generally along like the Highway 7 corridor, which doesn't really address the issue that we have in the rural areas. So there's a lot of different pieces to it that it's not, the city simply doesn't have the power to dictate to Mediacom or anybody else that thou will and thou shall. It's much, a lot more complicated than that. We're trying to figure out ways that we can do this. We're not alone. There's a lot of cities in the same predicament. And also when we look at grants, we're looking at, grants that often go out to the very rural areas because they're considered not served. We're actually considered served but underserved. Now, people might argue with that definition, but we don't define that. That's defined by the state that makes the grants. And so considering that we're underserved, we're not a high priority from a grant perspective. So it kind of puts us in a limbo of, we're served, but not to the extent that we would like to. And that doesn't put us at the top of the list. So it's another challenge in the funding mechanism as well.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the detail.
I have one question for you with that, Mike, because I understand this a little bit. Have we checked with Frontier? Now, I know that most of where Frontier is, as hard as it is to believe that they meet the requirements that the federal government is sets on them. But there are some grants available to services where they don't meet that. Have we checked to see if Frontier is looking into any of those?
We had some discussion about Frontier. I think we'll have more discussion. Frontier is actually having quite a bit of financial difficulty, and I think investing with that entity might be a risky proposition, in that we don't get the investment back.
Okay.
And again, for the extent that it's a grant, it gets to be hard to prove that, because they do provide service, so you're underserved, not unserved. So
yep.
It weakens the argument. But it certainly has been, they've been a topic of discussion as well, and continue to be. So we haven't given up on that. It's just one of many aspects of that discussion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay. The favorite part of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
This
Nobody
is Peter.
wants-
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Peter wants to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second, Gary Bars.
Gary Bars, thank you. And I'm going to do the roll call. Laura, yes. Peter?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Damien?
Yes. Aye.
Steve?
Yes.
Gary Bars?
Yes.
Gary Pettis?
Yes.
7-0 and 7 ayes. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
An
Thank
interesting
you,
discussion.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, it was a hard one.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, it's all right. It's all good. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.